This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so I remember to turn that on. So welcome to today's webinar. As I mentioned, this is a second in a series of 6 webinars where we're talking about how to leverage emotional intelligence in this time of crisis. Our world has changed, and I suspect has changed in ways that we have not even realized as yet as a result of this pandemic. And this is really impacting the way that we are working, the way that we are interacting. So today our focus is on leadership and being a leader worth following, how to lead in these times of crisis. So you're very welcome to those who've just joined us. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mucha Mlingo. I am the founder of PTS Africa, and I am an emotional intelligence practitioner. So I work with individuals, teams, and organizations to help them understand how they can utilize emotional intelligence as a key skill to drive performance. So let us jump right ahead with our program. So I'm part of a global organization, global network, I should say, called 6 Seconds. 6 Seconds is a nonprofit network practicing and sharing the learnable, measurable, scientific skills of emotional intelligence. Founded in 1997, 6 Seconds is the first and largest organization 100% dedicated to the development of emotional intelligence. As I mentioned, I run a boutique consultancy, PTS Africa, and we are a 6 Seconds preferred partner in this region. We're part of a mission, a global mission, to have 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence. The United States military uses the acronym VUCA to describe times like the ones we find ourselves in: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And in such an environment, we need to lead differently. In such an environment, we need to make sure that as leaders, we are doing what is required to be able to move our teams forward in this time of uncertainty. And we need strategies and tactics that are different to the normal tactics. You know, Aristotle is said to have quoted that, you know, it is insanity to do the same thing and expect a different result. And so in this season, in this time of crisis, what are we doing as leaders to ensure that we are still moving our teams, our organizations forward in the direction that we would like to go? And it's really important that as leaders, we are mindful of the way that people are feeling and the uncertainty that exists. And the question, what does the future hold? What is it that is ahead of us? And so today we're just going to be exploring what that means for those of us who lead. What we know about high-performing teams, and high-performing workplaces is that they share some key hallmarks. People have a sense of safety and assurance. Because they trust, they will take risks, they will innovate. People are energized and committed. They give of their discretionary effort. They are highly motivated. People are adaptive and innovative. People collaborate and communicate well. They are a strong team. And people are focused and accountable. And these are the characteristics or the traits, if you like, of a high-performing team. So in this season of crisis, what do our teams look like? How would we describe our teams? Would we say that we still are leading a high-performance team? I'd like us to do an exercise. You will find that somewhere on your screen is a chat box. I'd like you to open up the chat box, and I want to ask you a question, and I'm asking that you share your thoughts, all right? Share your answers with regards to this question. So in a crisis, what qualities do you want to see from your leader? So in a crisis, what qualities do you want to see from your leader? All right, so I've typed it in the chat box. All right, Wycliffe says calmness. I see calmness, empathy. All right, so in a crisis, what qualities do you want to see from your leader? Tandy says decisiveness. Anne says calmness, communicative, speed to action. Thank you very much for sharing. Keep sharing, please. In a crisis, what qualities do you want to see from your leader? All right. Transparency, I see that. Thank you very much, Ivy. Tandy, give clear direction. Okay, keep sharing, keep sharing. What I'd like to do is I'd like to type in on our screen what I am seeing from you. So let's put that in. So I see calmness. I see calmness, empathy. Okay, decisiveness. You will forgive me if I don't spell it correctly. Oh, decisiveness. No, that's not right. Safeness. Okay. Calmness. Keep typing, please. What else would you like to see? Thank you very much. I see Anna's put calmness, communicative. Felicia, I see you put communicative. If you don't mind adding a bit more, when you say communicative, can you expand on that? I see transparency, speed to action. I'm going to put that in this box, speed to action. I see transparency again, clear direction. I'm going to put that in this box. Gives, oops, no. All right, please keep sharing. Please keep sharing. Gives clear direction. And like I said, I'm typing it in the chat box. You will forgive me if my spelling is not correct, but I just want us to have these to hand. I see honesty. Ah, I like this. So Zalka says informative. Informative, I think. I think I'll put it in this box. Informative. Please keep sharing your thoughts. Informative. Empathy has been said quite a few times. Consultative. So consultative is, you know, engaging you as a team member. Honesty has been said again. Lead by example. Oh, I like that one, Tandy. Optimism. Let's type that in as well. Optimism. Lead by example. Okay, so lead by example. I'm going to put it up at the top of our list. Lead by example. Okay, agility. Aha, interesting. Any other that I've left out? Optimism. Oh, authenticity. Thank you very much, Wycliffe. Authenticity, inclusiveness. Inclusiveness. Oh, Tandy. Manage complexity. Tandy, if you don't mind, can you just type again, complexity? What exactly you mean by that? Allow conversation and, okay, Felicia, thank you so much for adding. So you when you say consultative, you're saying someone who allows conversation and input. I like that. Okay, thank you for adding that. Adaptability is another. Ooh, boldness. That one's interesting. Boldness. All right, so let's make this boldness. Let's reduce the text so that we can fit more stuff. Come on, cooperate with me. All right, anyone else? Let's keep adding, please. I want us to make this list exhaustive as we work on it together. All right, so boldness I have here. Adaptability again, inclusiveness, following up on the team. to know how they're faring on. So can we put connecting for that one? Flexibility. Thank you, Tandy. Ivy, optimistic, be positive, irrespective of the circumstance. Fair. Wow, thank you. These are really good. Humane. Vulnerable. Interesting one, Tandy. Vulnerable. Let me lift this up a little so I can have a bit more space. Vulnerable. Making hard decisions, adaptive, confidence, and okay, so decision, I'm going to put decision making on this side. All right, and then back here we have confidence and resilience. Wow, okay, so if you were in class right now, I would say give yourselves a round of applause. So please just take a moment, give yourselves a round of applause for sharing those amazing insights. So let's have a look at our table. And if there's anything else you want to add, please feel free to do so as we go on. I will be happy to keep adding. I see a sensitive. Okay, thank you, Tandy. You've expounded on complexity, able to think through the challenges using various thinking and emotional skills. All right. So thank you very much. And like I said, if you have any other, just keep adding them. For those who've joined us, we're talking about the characteristics of a leader. And we're talking specifically in times of crisis, what do you want to see from your leader? So what are the characteristics that you would like to see? What are the qualities you would like to see? Now, have a look at this table, and I've tried to categorize it a little, and it may not be as clear, so we'll just talk through. Can anyone tell me, and you'll feel free to unmute yourself, can anyone tell me what they think these two categories could be? So I've categorized them, I've separated the things you've told me, and I've put them in two columns, all right? So the first column I have lead by example, calmness, empathy, decisiveness, calmness again, communicative, transparency, honesty, consultative, so allows conversation and input from the team, optimism, agility, authenticity, inclusiveness, managed complexity. So managed complexity maybe, let me actually put this on the other side, adaptability, boldness, connecting, flexibility, fair, humane, vulnerable, confidence, resilience, sensitive. So can anyone tell me what they think my table is? So what do you think what do you think the categories I have made are? All right, anyone, and just unmute yourself and say, how do you think I have categorized these two columns? So the second column has speed to action, gives clear direction, informative, although technically informative could probably be in the other table as well, decision making, so makes decisions and is able to make complex decisions. Tandy talks about managed complexity as, you know, being able to work through, to think through the challenges using various thinking and emotional skills. All right, so any idea what these two categories are? Anyone, please unmute yourself and you can share. Thank you very much, Caroline Guffey. If we were in class, I would give you a lollipop. Well done for getting it right. So this is what Caroline says. Caroline says that this column is the soft skills, all right? So I'm going to call these the EQ skills. And this column is the technical skills. Now, I mentioned some of the things I've put on the technical side, which is why it may not have been as clear, are ones that are interchangeable. But looking at this, I think you would agree with me that in times of crisis, the skill, the characteristics that you need from your leader are more the soft skills than the technical skills. All right, so if you agree with that statement, I'd like you to just post in the chat box. All right, just post in the chat box if you agree with that statement, that in times of crisis, the skills that we are, or the characteristics that we are looking for from our leaders are primarily the soft EQ skills rather than the technical ability. So please just Let's do a count. I have 30 people on this call, 30 people on this webinar. Let's see how many agree. And if you disagree, you're very welcome to say so. You can say you disagree and why. But just looking at what you have shared in terms of what it is that you are looking for. Let's take it a little further. Can anyone share why they think that is the case? Thank you very much. I see most people are saying agree. Ivy, Valerie, Mary, Felicia, Zalka all agree. Tandy agrees. Can anyone tell me, and feel free to unmute your microphone or use the chat box to type, why do you think that is? Why do you think in times of crisis, what we are looking for in our leaders are their EQ skills? They are what we refer to as their soft skills. Anyone who would like to share?
Mucha, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I think what I've experienced in this time of crisis is that a lot of what you may need to operationally happen is almost coming to a stop. So the technical skills are not that relevant because people are experiencing sort of a lot of uncertainty. So it's touching on their feelings a lot more. And so you need to get in touch with that part of the employees so that you can be able to connect and then be able to ride through the time of crisis. So I think it's affecting people more emotionally, and so you need to focus a lot on that so that you can get the clarity to then apply the technical skills.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Wycliffe. I appreciate that. And I agree with you 100%. Anyone else? Please do feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat box. Welcome, Effie, to today's session. I see that we look for EQ skills for purposes of connecting with the human person. The emotional person needs more support. Thank you very much for that. Ivy says to reassure folks that this crisis is not permanent and then guide them through immediate action to prepare for the future. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else who would like to feel free to unmute yourself and share? Why is it that in this time of crisis, the characteristics, the leadership characteristics that we are looking for are more related to the soft skills, the EQ skills, than the technical skills? Anyone else would like to share? Please do feel free.
Hello, Mucha.
Hi, Janet, go ahead.
Hi, this is Patricia. I think in times of crisis, there's normally a new norm that comes about. And you find as employees, we'll tend to either be scared, we're confused, we don't know what's coming. So then the soft skills come in necessary with our leaders.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. That was Janet, you said.
Hi, Mucha.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Anyone else would like to share? I think
So
there was someone
Mucha,
who looked like they were sharing. Please go ahead. Yes.
Tandy here.
Hi, Tandy.
Neurologically, we know that in times of crisis, our thinking brain gets shut off, so and our emotional brain is more activated. So it becomes very important to calm down the emotional brain so that you can access the higher thinking skills which sit up in our cortex.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tandy. And thank you for joining us, Tandy, all the way from South Africa. I appreciate it. So yes, there's more people sharing here. In times of crisis, Mary says people need to connect with the human side of the leader. Rodney says in times of crisis, communication is key. So I think we can all agree, and Tandy put it so eloquently, that in times of crisis, the emotional brain is the one that is on high alert. And so in order to access the kind of higher order thinking, we need to make sure that we connect with that emotional side that our people are grappling with. So today we're talking about how to lead in crisis. And what I'd like to share with you are three key tips that will help us in our efforts to lead in crisis. And these three key tips are based on the fact that in times of crisis, individuals are looking for the emotional side. Before I jump to that, it's really important to understand that this thing called emotional intelligence is not a fad. Emotional intelligence is a reality, and research shows that leaders who are higher in emotional intelligence are more effective. Leaders who are higher in emotional intelligence are actually more effective. At PepsiCo, executives who are selected for EQ competencies generated 10% more productivity. Amadori, a supplier to McDonald's, experienced a 63% reduction in turnover and manager in turnover. And as a result of having EQ introduced for their management team. And what they found was that the EQ correlated positively with plant performance. So as the manager EQ increased, the performance of the plant increased. So the plants that were run by managers who were higher in emotional intelligence did better. So this soft skill actually has bottom line results. Leaders who score higher in key aspects of emotional intelligence in another study, including empathy and self-awareness, were more likely to be profitable. And I picked these results from an article published by 6 Seconds, known as the business case for emotional intelligence. And these are just 3 that I picked, but research upon research shows that emotional intelligence drives bottom line results. This soft skill actually drives hard results. And in seasons of crisis like now, it is even more important to leverage on emotional intelligence. In seasons of crisis like now, it is even more important to leverage on emotional intelligence. In seasons of crisis, it is even more important to leverage on emotional intelligence. So as I mentioned, I'd like to share 3 things that will help lead in this time of crisis. And I want you to understand that these 3 things I'm sharing speak only to the emotional intelligence skills, because I believe, and research supports it, that emotional intelligence skills are what we need in this time of crisis. So here we go. 3 skills, 3 tactics that will help leaders to navigate times of crisis and ensure that they are a leader worth following. So the first thing, and if you've interacted with me at all, you will know I say this over and over and over. Emotions are data. Emotions are data. And behind every emotion we feel, there is a message. If we ask, emotion was an ally, giving me invaluable insight, what information would this particular emotion be sending me? So tactic, the first skill that a leader must be able to flex is based out of an understanding that emotions are data. Think of your emotions as a car's dashboard. When your emotional check engine light comes on, you are receiving invaluable information. You wouldn't ignore your fuel light, or at least if you do, you ignore it at your peril. Why ignore the information that is coming from your emotions? Emotions are data. And it's really important as leaders that you connect with that information. And especially because we've already established that at this time, what your team is looking for is your ability to navigate those emotions. Each of those items that we listed were part of the soft skills. And so for you to be able to connect with your team and actually give them the kind of cues that they need, it starts with you understanding that emotions are data. Emotions are neither negative or positive. Emotions are data. They are insight. They are information. Your emotions are a message from yourself to yourself. Imperative that as a leader, you actually pick up on those emotions, and then not just pick up on them, but utilize the emotions. And so if we your tactic is, in this instance, is being able to pick up on that data and understand that emotions drive people, and your people are the ones who drive the results. And as Tandy said earlier, at this time, you need to be aware of the insights your emotions are giving you. And then you also need to understand that ultimately emotions drive people. Emotions drive people. And so as a leader in this season of crisis, you need to have a crash course on how to understand your own emotions and how to tap into the emotions of others. Self-awareness is an invaluable skill right now. And right now, what you want to do is you need to make sure you understand how to tap into the emotions of your team, because the reality is their emotions are driving their behavior right now. In seasons, in periods of crisis, the emotional part of the brain is in high gear. And so this is the time to develop the skill as a leader of actually utilizing that. So understanding that, as I mentioned, emotions are data, and because emotions are data, you must understand that your team right now are being driven by the way that they feel. It's important to truly tune in to your body and help your team to tune into theirs. Help them to understand that emotions ultimately will influence their behavior. And what happens is we often ignore our emotions. We have been taught to suppress them. We have been taught to put them aside. So what I'd like us to do is I'd like you to pull out a sheet of paper. So everyone pull out a sheet of paper. If you joined me last week, you will know that these sessions are, meant to be reflective as we go along so that you have takeaways. So pull out a sheet of paper, and I'd like you to think. I'd like you to write down some responses to a series of questions that I'm going to ask you. So the first question is, when you think about the next 3 months, so when you look ahead in the next 3 months, how do you feel about your ability to lead your team? So when you think about the next 3 months, how do you feel about your ability to lead your team? What is the overriding emotion that you feel when you think about navigating the next 3 months ahead? So this is to yourself. Write this down. How do you feel about your ability to lead your team over the next 3 months? Write that down. What is the overriding emotion that comes to mind? And because emotions come in multiples, what else do you feel? Because emotions come in multiples, what else do you feel? Let's dig a little bit deeper and go to another level. What else do you feel? When you think about the next 3 months ahead, when you think about navigating what's about to happen, when you think about leading your team remotely for however long this season lasts, when you think about how you will begin to recover as an organization, when you think about all of these things, how do you feel? What is the overriding emotion that you feel? And then ask yourself, how else do you feel? Because emotions come in multiples. And how else? Now, I'd like you to look at what you've written down. I'd like you to look at what you've written down. Remember, we're saying that the first tactic to help you lead this season of crisis is an understanding that emotions are data and emotions drive people. Emotions drive you and emotions drive your team. So we are reflecting and we're doing a self-awareness activity that will help you to think through how you feel. So the question is, when you look at those emotions you have written down, look at each feeling that you identified and ask yourself, what insight can you gain from this feeling, this emotion? What is this emotion trying to tell you? Look at each and ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to tell you? What insight can you gain from this? I'm seeing a message here from Susie that you can't hear me. Can you guys hear me now? Yeah, I've just muted. Someone had their phone, they were not on mute, so I've just muted them. Thank you very much for that, Susie. Thank you very much for that. So the question is, have a look at these things that you have written down and ask yourself, what insight is this trying to give you? And then ask yourself, how can you use that insight to make you a better, more emotionally intelligent leader? So the first step was, what are you feeling? Then, what insight can you gain from these feelings? And then lastly, how can you use that insight to make you a better, more emotionally intelligent leader? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to complete that. Okay. So the first thing for you to understand as a leader is the fact that emotions are data, and that data is useful insight. And ultimately, as a leader, understand that emotions drive people. That is the case under every circumstance, but even more so in times of crisis. And so as a leader, it's imperative that you connect and understand how you feel, and that you help your people to understand how they feel. So when you say insight, what do you mean? So insight is the idea that your emotions are giving you information. It is a message from yourself to yourself. So Tasha, for example, if the overriding emotion, that I have as I think about the future is fear, it's important to understand that that fear is giving me insight, it's giving me information, and I need to kind of pick it up, look at it, unpack it, and ask myself, what is this fear trying to tell me? I like to think of emotions as your friends who are giving you information. It's a message from yourself to yourself. And what we have been taught to do in the past is to just ignore or to suppress. So in the example I've given of fear, we've been taught that we ignore, we suppress our fear. But the reality is, what we should do is look at that fear and ask ourselves, what can I learn from this fear? Now that may sound, counterintuitive, but the reality is fear is giving us a message that we are concerned about potential loss. And so the question is, how do I use that information? How do I use the knowledge that I have fear about the future? How do I use that to make me a more intelligent leader? One of the ways I can use that is I can understand that if I'm feeling it, the odds are the rest of the team are feeling it too. And so how can I help them to navigate that fear, that anxiety? So that's what I mean. Tasha, I hope that's clearer. Susie, you've asked me to repeat the third question. So the third question is, how can you use that insight? How can you use that information? How can you use that knowledge about the emotion you're feeling to help you become a more emotionally intelligent leader? So the idea is, what am I feeling? Number one. What does that feeling mean? So what insight can I gain from that? What does that mean? If this feeling was a friend trying to give me advice, what advice would that be? And then lastly, how can I use that advice to make me a better, more emotionally intelligent leader? I hope that's clearer. So that's the first thing that we must understand as leaders. The second thing we must understand as leaders is that it is not possible to leave emotions at the door. So you can't leave your emotions at the door, and neither can they. We've been told over and over that this is work and we must leave our emotions at the door. But the reality is that that is something that is not possible to do, because emotions are an integral part of who we are. Remember what we've said, emotions are data. Emotions are data. And so rather than leaving them at the door, how can we use that information, and how can we navigate that feeling? All right? Emotions are data. How can you navigate that feeling? Rather than this idea of trying to control your emotions or trying to suppress your emotions or leaving your emotions aside as though they are a separate part of you, it's important to understand that emotions are insight, and it's insight that you should utilize. One of the most frequent questions in emotional intelligence coaching is, how can I better control my emotions? How can I better control my emotions? And this language reveals a bias that there are bad emotions, a bias and a thinking that there are bad emotions that require control, which means exerting power and subduing. What we should be asking ourselves, rather than asking how to control, is how can I harness? How can I navigate? It's not possible to leave emotions at the door. Instead, what we must do is become more emotionally intelligent. Learn to be more aware of your emotions and ultimately use that as insight, as I've mentioned, use that to move yourself forward. Tasha, you're asking, is this the same as asking myself, why am I fearful? Yes, Tasha, it's unpacking. It's getting to the bottom of, what you can gain from understanding that emotion. The reality is every emotion is giving you some sort of information. And what you want to do is not just dismiss it at the surface, but to dig a little deeper and spend time understanding that emotion and understanding what you can learn from it and why you're feeling the way you're feeling. Because when we understand, when we can interpret what this data is trying to tell us, then we are in a better position to be able to use it. All right? So what we want to understand is that your team are feeling the way they are feeling, and you can't tell them to stop feeling that way. And you may smile because you've not told your team that, but remember, we tell our team things either verbally or in our non-verbal communication. So you may not have said, leave your emotions at the door, but your actions could actually show that that is what you are expressing. I've spent the last couple of nights in hospital. My son was admitted on Tuesday morning. So we had a really rough night on Monday night, and Tuesday morning he was admitted to hospital. And I've literally just come home this morning just so I can facilitate this session. He's actually still in hospital, so my husband is the one who's on duty this morning. But while he was in hospital, there was a time when the doctor came and they wanted to put an IV line so that they could give him his drugs via IV. And as the doctor came in, my son has a phobia of needles. As the doctor came in and he looked at the needle, he told me, "Mommy, I'm scared." And so I said to him, that's fine, but it's not going to hurt. And we had a conversation, maybe about 2 minutes, where I was appealing to the rational part of his brain and telling him, yeah, but it's not going to hurt, it's just a prick. Until I realized that actually what I need to speak to is his fear. And I need to help him navigate his fear, as opposed to focusing on the fact that the needle won't hurt, as opposed to focusing on the fact that the needle is small. And often when we're engaging with our teams, the way we respond, remember we said earlier that in this time of crisis, we need to speak to the emotions, because the emotions are what are the overriding. The emotional part of the brain is the one that is on a high alert. And so in that moment, it struck me that rather than focusing on the rational, explaining how it's going to take a short amount of time, it's a really small needle, it will be over before you know it, which are the things I was saying, what I needed to do was I needed to speak to how he was feeling, speak to his fear. And this is the case with your teams. You need to speak to their fear. So emotions are data. Stop trying to control them. Emotions are data. Stop trying to control your team's emotions. Navigate yours and help them to navigate theirs. Help them to understand, help them to see from the things you say and the things that you do that you are not asking them to leave their emotions at the door. That you understand that in this time of crisis, emotions are at the fray and you want to help them to navigate those emotions. And really, it starts with you being able to navigate yours. So that's the second thing. Understand that your emotions are data and that you cannot separate yourself from those emotions. The reality is that you must use these emotions as information and you must navigate the emotion. So how do I navigate out of fear, for example? And you need to make sure that your team sees, and I really want to emphasize this, hears from what you say and sees from what you do, that you are not asking them to leave their emotions at the door. That somehow you are aware that in this time of crisis, that their emotions are really at the fray. Their emotions are, the emotional part of the brain is the one that is hyperactive. And so you are developing the emotional intelligence required to be able to meet them at their point of need. The third thing, and I see that I'm really quickly running out of time. I want to make sure that I have some time to answer questions. The third thing is that emotions are contagious. Emotions are contagious. An anxious leader generates an anxious office. Just like a smiling and cheerful teacher can put a class in a good mood, and the same way that when you come home from the office or when you've come home from the office in the past in a bad mood, it somehow finds a way to transmit itself to your family. Emotions are contagious. So it's really important that as a leader, you are aware, and that's why we started with self-awareness, understanding how you are feeling, because there is a very high chance that you are transmitting how you are feeling. Research shows that people have a tendency to unconsciously mimic the emotional expressions of others. This mimicry triggers reactions in our brains that cause us to interpret other people's expressions as our own feelings, making us vulnerable to catching other people's feelings. And this emotional contagion means that in addition to affecting our own thoughts and actions, our emotions are affecting those around us. So as a leader, the question to ask yourself is, what emotions are you transmitting? If you are a radio antenna beaming out to your team, what are you beaming out? Now, it doesn't mean that you must suppress how you feel because you don't want your team to know the anxiety that you are feeling. That's not what we're talking about. At the end of the day, it's okay to feel that anxiety. It's asking yourself, what can I do about it? How can I navigate that anxiety? And it's ensuring that when you interact with your team, you transmit emotions that will help to move you forward as a team, as opposed to taking you backwards. And some of that is, as per our earlier point, making it clear to the team that you're not asking them to leave their emotions at the door. A lot of leaders see soft and hard skills as antagonistic, as opposite ends. But the reality is right now, we must find ways to integrate both the rational and the emotion. We must find ways to integrate. We must find ways to lead from the front. And the reason why, when we did the exercise earlier about what is it that you're looking for from your leader in this time of crisis, I moved to the front the response that says leading from the front. At this time, more than ever, as a leader, you must lead from the front. And leading from the front means knowing what emotions you are giving out. What are you transmitting? When you interact with your team, what are they picking up from you? And this is something you're going to have to do intentionally. You're going to have to do this intentionally. You're going to have to put in your mind that I must ensure that what I am giving to the team, as far as my emotions are concerned, is something that will lift them up rather than throw them down, rather than demoralize them. Now, that doesn't mean telling lies. We must be honest. Actually, one of the things that you mentioned that you're looking for from your leader is honesty. So we must be honest, but there's a way that we can be honest, and there's a way that we can be mindful about what emotions we are transmitting. So the question I would ask you is, what emotion are you transmitting? As you interact with your team, what do you think they are picking up? And like I said, this is something that you must be extremely intentional about. Emotional intelligence is about being smarter with your feelings, being more aware, being more intentional, and being more purposeful. Some people just get along better with others. They respond carefully in the face of challenge, and they truly connect with people. These are individuals who are high in emotional intelligence, and this is the skill that is required in this season, more than your technical ability. What is required right now is your ability to be smart with your feelings, to understand that emotions are data, and ask yourself, what insights can you gain from them? To understand that this data is meant to help you navigate, it's meant to help you make choices. It should not be suppressed, and it cannot be left at the door. And to understand that emotions are contagious. So what you are feeling, you are transmitting. So as you interact with your team, you need to be more intentional about what you're transmitting. You need to make sure that you are raising the mood rather than damping the mood. Emotional intelligence is just being more aware, it's being more intentional, and it's being more purposeful. I want to thank you so much for your time. I want to leave these 10 minutes we have remaining to answer any questions that you may have. So I will take questions at this time, and feel free to share your question in the chat box or to say your question. I'd encourage you to type it out in the chat box, and the only reason why I say that is in the event that we run out of time and I'm not able to answer your question, if it's in the chat box, when I get the transcribed version of the conversation, I can actually reach out to you as an individual and answer the question you have. So please do share any questions that you may have. Put them in the chat box. I know Anne is on the call, and if anyone does voice their question, please feel welcome. I'll ask Anne to type it in. All right. So a question here: what exercises can one do to be mindful of our emotions? Thank you. That's a really awesome question. So that's really speaking to developing greater self-awareness. I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to make an appointment with ourselves to just reflect. The reality is very many of us operate on autopilot. We do not take time to stop and reflect on the way that we are feeling. So that exercise that we did, where you ask yourself, what am I feeling? What else am I feeling? What else am I feeling? So I think the first thing is making sure that you spend a bit of time, and even more so now, because the reality is our feelings are, all over the place. So it's reflecting, it's taking time to reflect and ask yourself, what am I feeling? And take it to 3 layers. What else am I feeling? And what else? And then asking yourself, what is that feeling trying to tell me? Because if feelings are data, what is that feeling trying to tell me? I often find that when I write down, when I do that kind of brain dump, and I'm then able to read what I've written, it actually helps me to have a better understanding of what my emotions are. So the first thing is write it down. Spend some time reflecting. The second thing is learn to actually say it out loud. Let it become a natural part of conversation that you actually share how you feel. And we're talking about sharing how you're feeling with your family, sharing how you feel with your team. You will be amazed at how, especially as a leader, when you lead from the front and actually talk about how you're feeling, when you go out of your way to connect, that actually helps you, because the more you speak about it, the easier it becomes. The reality about emotional intelligence is it's like a muscle. The more you utilize a muscle, the easier it becomes to utilize it. So I would say that speak, talk about how you feel. Let it become normal to talk about how you feel. Let it become normal as a team to have conversations where you connect. All right. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much for sharing, for being with us, and thanks to those who are sharing in the chat box. I really hope that you have enjoyed the session, and hopefully everyone, when you logged in, gave us your email address so that we can share the video once it's uploaded to YouTube with you. And like I said, any questions in the chat box that I've not addressed, I will be able to respond to you. So Ivy, how can you balance being honest with your team without transmitting negative emotions? Thank you very much, Ivy. That's a really good question. So I think the key here, Ivy, is to really be mindful how you frame your statements, how you frame what it is you're saying. So again, I'd encourage you, before you share anything you want to share with your team, just think it through and write it down and just frame it. Look at how you are framing what you're saying. We often frame what we say in very negative ways. All right, we often frame what we're saying, and what we're saying is impacted by our non-verbal communication. And right now you may not be physically with your team, but non-verbal communication comes through even on the phone and comes through even now as we've been engaging, utilizing these tools. So I think for me, it's think through how you frame what you say, because it's very important to be honest. I cannot overemphasize that. You must be honest with your team. I had a very frank conversation with my team about, what's next, how the next 3 months are really very unclear. The next 3 months, we are uncertain, how we are going to move forward as a team. And then we brainstormed on what we can do about it. So I think it's really important that we are honest with the team. It's just a case of framing and asking yourself, how are you framing it? And then preparing yourself mentally and psychologically to ensure that you are transmitting the right kind of energy as you are sharing that information, especially when it's information that is difficult to put across. So I hope that's helped. Anyone else with any question that they would like to ask? And like I said, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask, you're welcome to, or you can share on the chat. There's someone who's asking about the sessions that we have going forward. So the sessions we have going forward, we have a session on how to sell in this time of crisis. We have a session on customer service in this time of crisis. We have the other two sessions on leading teams. So we're going to look at motivating your team. So how do you motivate your team at this time? And then we'll also be looking at teamwork. So how do you work as a team when you are working remotely? All right, so those are the things that we will be exploring over the remaining 4 weeks that we have of this EQ in Crisis series of webinars. All right, so next week we will be okay, my computer has just gone off. All right, so next week we'll be talking about sales. So driving sales in this time. So for those of you who have salespeople, you'd like them to join, please do get them to register. Obviously on our social media pages, we'll be talking about the title. So how do you sell in this time of crisis? Week 4 will be leading teams. So how do we motivate teams in this time of crisis? Week 5 will be delighting customers in this time of crisis. So how do we make sure that we delight customers in this time of crisis? And then the last one will be, how do we enhance teamwork in this time of crisis? How do we enhance teamwork in this time of crisis? So that's what we are going to be looking at over the next few weeks. Okay, time has come to an end. So thank you so much for engaging with us today. I hope I have answered the questions that were asked. And like I said, if there's any question that I have missed, I will reach out to you as an individual. Let me just have a quick look at the chat box in the last few minutes that we have. Okay, I think I've answered. Like I said, if there's anything I've not answered, I'm more than happy to come back to you as an individual and share with you and respond to your questions. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to having you with us next week. As I mentioned, next week, we're talking about selling in this time of crisis. The reality is that business must somehow find a way to go on. How do we do that? So looking forward to having you on the session next week. So thank you very much. Have a fabulous day. And thank you so much to those of you who've shared your messages about my son. I'm grateful. He is much better, and we are trusting that he'll be discharged today. So thank you very much for that. Your kind words, I truly appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Feel free to exit the call. Again, thank you for your time, and looking forward to having you with us again next week. Follow us on our social media pages at PTS Africa, at Mucha Mlingo, for continued updates and insights on the session. Thank you very much.